Welcome to today's Indigenous Health Rounds. I would first like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we're gathering. This round is occurring in the Digital Emergency Medicine Unit and iCON, which is on the shared, unceded, ancestral, and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. My name is Kendall Ho. It's my distinct honor to be able to moderate this session, and I've been learning so much from all these rounds, and I know I'll learn a lot today. I want to thank all of you for joining us because today we're very fortunate to have a knowledge keeper and speaker, Siam Kike Dr. Shane Point, joining us today. We're also very fortunate to have Derek Thompson, Čaabať, Bookwilla, Sihiltun from Dita Dats First Nations, one of the 14 Nuuchahnulth communities along the west coast of Vancouver Island, as our speaker for today's session. We'll first begin today with an opening by our knowledge keeper and speaker, Dr. Shane Point, followed by the presentation by Derek. Dr. Point.
First, I would like to say thank you to all of you, leaders, friends, and relatives, for answering the invitation to witness and partake in this very wonderful and special moment. I welcome you here to the sacred territory of the Musqueam people. I welcome you here. Thank you very much. I'd like to start again. Čaabať, Bookwilla, To all of the leaders, my friends and my relatives who are here, I want to introduce to you Bookwilla, Čaabať, Bookwilla, dot. Čaabať, Bookwilla, dot. I want to introduce to you a very special human being, a gentleman of intergenerational, spiritual, cultural, and ceremonial strength. Čaabať, Bookwilla, Derek Thompson, wonderful human being, here today to share with you from his own experience, his education, and his being here in this wonderful life. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Point, for helping us opening in such a great way. Again, everyone, thank you so much for being here. There will be opportunities for you to ask questions and share your thoughts. Please, our preference is if you have questions and answers, please go to the Q&A so you can submit your comments and questions there, preferably not on the chat itself. Also, it's our privilege to be able to have the agreements of Derek and also Dr. Point for us to record the session. Please be reminded that the session will be recorded, just want our audience to know about. Really want to thank our partners. First, I want to be so grateful for the foundational support of BC Ministry of Health, Patients and Partners Initiative. We've developed a very long-standing relationship over the past 12 years to work with Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Health continues to advance the shared journey of reconciliation, apply equity and anti-racism approaches, and address systemic racism in the health system. This is recognized in the Ministry of Health mandate letter that states that the ministry will continue working towards true and meaningful reconciliation by supporting opportunities for Indigenous people to be full partners in the inclusive and sustainable province we're building together. And in this work, then, Ministry of Health continues to address recommendations from Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's Call to Action, UN DRIP, and the In Plain Sight report. I'd also like to acknowledge our partners at Vancouver Coastal Health, Indigenous Health. VCH plays a critical role in upholding the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act, DRIPA, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada 94 calls to action, and in implementing 24 recommendations of the In Plain Sight report. And together, VCH is committed to celebrate Indigenous ways of knowing and being, to acknowledge strength and courage demonstrated while enduring generations of atrocities, and embedding Indigenous cultural safety across the health system. We also like to acknowledge the joint participation of the First Nations Health Authority for the integral guidance and support. And also, finally, but not the least, we acknowledge the support of Vancouver Physician Staff Association as we work together to engage the physician community to build a more collaborative, inclusive, and caring community. I want to thank the organizing committee, the Engaging Physicians for Indigenous Cultural Safety Committee, and there are quite a few members there. I won't read them out at this point, but I really want to thank the committee for helping us to organize these rounds and also to support today's event. And so I would now like to open the stage and welcome warmly Derek Thompson to speak on the topic of From Birth Until Death, a respective insight into ceremony, grief, and grieving. Dr. Point, should I come to you first, or should we go straight to Derek? Your thoughts? Maybe, Derek, shall I come to you? Great. Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Ho, for welcoming me back to this important conversation. And thank you to Uncle Shane for always showing up and always loving me and supporting me in this important work. I truly and unconditionally appreciate you, always. Haichka siem nasia tlako tlako. So I will begin, and I've learned in this work to when I've been asked to come and speak about these important matters, I typically will go away and think about these things, reflect on them, and more often than not, arrive at some quite very personal and arguably vulnerable thoughts and experiences on any given topic, and then write them out and go back and rewrite them, and will often take 5 or 6, 7, sometimes a dozen runs at what I want to say. Otherwise, we're here till 4 or 5 o'clock, and I've been talking for 3 or 4 hours without interruption, and you're wondering what the hell's going on. So, if you'll indulge me, I will provide a bit of introspection on this topic within the context of this particular speaker series. So again, thank you to Kendall for inviting me back. Thank you to Pooja for making all of the arrangements, the technical ability for this to happen. And thank you to all of you for showing up to this important conversation. So, good afternoon and welcome to this session. I will consider a respective insight into the importance of ceremony, grief, and grieving from a unique Nuuchahnulth and First Nations perspective within the context of truth, reconciliation, and healing. Uklama Bookwilla, Histakshulthma di Tidat. Uts Bookwilla, Nu Wixu Bookwilla. U mixu klama kekreanisaksa. U mixtuksa histashukla heisla. Nu wixtu histashukla tsubasat. My name is Derek Thompson, and my ancestral name is Bookwilla. And I am the Director of Indigenous Engagement with the UBC Faculty of Medicine. I was appointed the first Indigenous advisor in 2021 for the Office of Respectful Environments, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I am a seated and recognized hereditary chief, and my name, Bookwilla, is a signal to the people that I come from that I am a Čaabať, or a Hutweh, and its meaning is anchored in an ancient dialect that was once used to invoke the spirits of our ancestors. It was used as a force of gravity to call upon our most ancient and sacred ceremonies involving our Tlukwana, our wolves. Bookwilla is a Chesum, and a Chesum is the underpinning that calls our Cheha and our Yaquimet into our bodies, into our spirits, and into our being. Our Cheha, in Nuuchahnulth language, our Cheha are our ancestors whom we knew in life. We knew them, we loved them, we had a meaningful relationship with them, and now they're gone. Our Yaquimet is, in Nuuchahnulth language, our ancestors whom we never knew in life, but we know that we are inextricably connected to them. We come from them. And in many ways, our Yaquimet are our ideal sense of ourselves. They are who we aspire to be in life. So we're always, in some way, shape, or form, working towards achieving who they were. I come from a community called Tidat, and we're one of 14 Nuuchahnulth communities along the west coast of Vancouver Island. We Nuuchahnulth see the universe as composed of 4 great realms. The sea world, our front yard, is overseen by Nuuchahnulth, literally undersea Great Spirit Chief. The land and mountain world, our immediate home, is overseen by William, Great Spirit Chief of the land. The sky world, watched closely for signs of impending weather, is overseen by Čaabať. Way up in the sky, Great Spirit Chief. The spirit world is overseen by Nuuchahnulth, Great Spirit Chief beyond the horizon. The seas for miles of shoreline and all of the land on the western side of our Vancouver Island home, from Point No Point in the south to Brooks Peninsula in the north, is Nuuchahnulth territory, our Ha'ahuthi. When Nuuchahnulth gather to potlatch, when we come together to do important cultural and ceremonial work, when we enact our songs and dances, when we work out our way of being, the very first order of business, the very first thing we do, as a matter of obligation, before we do anything else, we acknowledge those relatives in our presence whom are grieving. That despite carrying intense sorrow and coping with the process of coming to terms with the loss of a loved one, dealing with the sometimes incomprehensible sharpness of grief and grieving, they're here with us. They're here to bear witness, to support, to be present, and to be aware of what is taking place in our potlatches. My mom, Maud, passed away on March 13th of this year. And so myself and my immediate and extended family are in the midst of mourning this painful loss. We typically will mourn for 1 full year of the lunar calendar, and throughout we will gather to lament, to express grief, and to cry for my mom. So before I begin this talk, I would like to sing this Yak song, this cry song, to acknowledge those here today joining this talk whom are grieving, who are hurting, who are burdened with the loss of a loved one, and to honor your feelings. And in spite of your sorrow, you're here, and to thank you for being present. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah. Ooh, hey. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah. Hey. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. ho, ooh, 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 ee, 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 ee. Yuck. Yuck songs. Yuck songs. Cry songs are intended as an impetus for people to literally cry. When we gather to cry, we will choose a venue that is quiet, out of the way, and where there's no opportunity to be interrupted. And we will often make sure to cover the windows so that people can feel assured that they won't be seen. When we gather to cry, we will appoint people, usually women, to start crying when we sing our cry songs, our ehyak songs. And their role is to cry. And through this important work, it is a gesture as permission to those family members gathered to cry, to weep, to mourn the loss of a loved one, as a way to work out their emotions, feelings, and thoughts, and with each other to come together and support a shared sense of loss and grief. We cry alone and we cry with each other. We will also share a meal and will often talk about our loved one and the memories we have that still have an effect on us. We will tell stories that make us laugh, make us feel that we're left marked by their life, and will reflect on the life they lived and what they left in this world that contributed to it being a better place. Our tears are dried. We will often hug each other, commit to coming together more often, reminisce of our loved ones, and uphold the process of grief and grieving. I often think that there's so much grief in our communities all the time. It's always there. We're a hurt people and we're hurting people. There are many people in our families and communities that need to cry and they don't. And it's to their own detriment that they don't. The drum beat is deliberately slow and tempo, and our cry songs typically have the same gentle double drum beat. And the song, in terms of form, is nonsensical. It's a language that is unintelligible. And it is also measured along with the drum beat. And it is intended to simulate the act of crying. So if you listen to the song, yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I think of when people I've experienced people crying or my own crying, that intense rawness of going through those emotions, and you've listened to people when they're calming down, when they're coming out of that intensity, I often hear like that, trying to catch their breath. Yeah, 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 ooh, 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 way. It's an incredible thing that you can match people's intensity of emotions with a song. So our cry songs will begin in this way and are often accompanied by songs that rise in tempo, and included is language that speak to the memory of our loved ones and our disposition of our grief individually and collectively. It's important that people understand that as we cry, we're healing. we're already starting to heal. Although the hurt is still there, we're healing. We're all born into the world, wet and disheveled, and clinging to life, not yet loose from the embryonic sac. We are born small. We are born with the force of our ancestors. We are born with the love of our mothers. From birth until death, we are clinging to all that is ancient and good. When you come into this world, the first thing you are given is a name. You spend your life making it into something. It's how you come to be known. It's how you're introduced. And as time goes on, it earns a reputation. Your name becomes your signature, and it's often made greater by the company it keeps. And for some, a name begins stories. It bonds generations, even feeds rivalries. It can demand immediate respect and inspire unconditional love, until ultimately your name can become unremembered. And once it's engraved on a memorial of the great expanse of time, it will never be forgotten. Maud Laura Shaw, my mom, was born April 16th, 1951, and was from the great good people that make up the Haisla Nation. And she persists in spirit, forever remembered for her unconditional love and generosity. As a UBC faculty member, or as a Faculty of Medicine faculty member, as a staff member, as a student, as a British Columbian, as a Canadian, as a colonial or new settler, how will you make your mark on the world in an era of truth and reconciliation? What will you inspire? What company will you keep? Will the integrity of your name begin an authentic narrative in this 5th chapter to commemorate the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation? Will your name bond generations of Canadians to come together to acknowledge and uphold First Nations rights and histories, or divide them? How will you, and how do you want to be remembered? My mom suffered the stain of the Indian residential school experience in Canada. And in spite of this tragedy, she created a meaningful and beautiful life and made sure that I created a life that is meaningful and filled with the same spirit of generosity and concern that shaped her own. Early, long ago, our ancestors collapsed time in an effort to become human. We are from cosmic and spiritual realms, and there's evidence of this living today in our healers, our writers of songs and creators of beauty. During the lunar cycles, we enact ancient rituals, and in the dark of night and in the dawn of the morning, we are born anew, giving life to rituals, songs, dances, and we become more powerful on the draw of every breath of all that is ancient and good. The ceremony of acknowledging those in our presence whom are grieving and hurting is intended to honor the balance between life and death, joy and grief, creation and destruction, beauty and ugliness, and the fleeting moments of meaning and insignificance. We are in a constant, mysterious, and evolving effort to enact ancient forms, advance ancestral sensibilities, and place bold meaning inside time-honored methods. Grief and grieving are as fundamental to living as life itself. Before we do anything of a serious matter, we always surround those who are grieving with love, care, and attention. There are many Indigenous peoples and communities that are hurt and hurting and are touched by grief and are grieving. There are many people inside our own settler communities that also have compassion for those who are hurt and grieving. in the midst of telling the truth and reconciling for the future, we must choose to stand with Indigenous peoples and to acknowledge their families and communities whom are hurt and grieving. It's with great sadness and profound awareness that we stand with all Indigenous peoples in this era of truth, reconciliation, redress, grief, and pain. And it's also with great hope and a deep responsibility that we, as we hold each other up and wash away the tears, we're also creating a stronger bond with each other. When my mom was ready to pass, I told her that I was going to claim her into my Tlukwana, into my society of wolves. Tlukwana is an ancient ritual that at the core of its movement centers always about the active dramatization of our most revered legend, which enacts the capture of our people by wolves and their recovery by certain already initiated people after receiving specific powers or instructions from wolves, and then are exorcised of the wolf spirit that once possessed them. These highly complex and highly regarded and sacred ceremonies are a bridge from this world to a spiritual and cosmic realm. Tlukwana is, in the most simple of terms, to seek out a treasure, or to seek out the source of a paragon of how our ancestors shifted and moved in the world, to always be discovering an abundance of meaning and purpose in carrying yourself in a manner that is an equal measure of dignity and humility. My mom taught me that you can be generous without being pretentious, thoughtful without being shallow, kind without being petty, and dutiful without being arrogant. It was only proper that I claim her into my Tlukwana. The moment that my mom was going to pass from this world to the spiritual and cosmic and mysterious realms, I was at the front desk of the palliative care unit, and I was asking the nurse if it was okay for me to chant and drum so that I could see her transition from this world to the next. The nurse looked at me and tears were welling up in her eyes, and she nearly whispered, "My dear, you don't need to ask permission to do such a beautiful thing for your mom." She got up from behind her desk and she came around to where I was standing and she hugged me. And I hugged her back, holding back my tears. And I knew that if I started crying, I would not be able to stop. I returned to my mom's room, and as we gathered around her with a shield of love, sadness, care, heartache, prayer, and meditation, I offered my most sacred chant. And in a moment, she was no longer with us. When my son, Chaz, was a boy in grade 1, we were at a school function along with other parents, and I was looking for him. He went to get a drink of water from a fountain, and as I was talking, and as I was walking towards him, another boy, a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, pushed him out of the way from the fountain. Chaz stood there confused, and I froze. I just stood there. I did nothing. And when I think about my role as a father, the one regret I have is that I didn't do anything to stand up for my son. I didn't model some kind of integrity for my son. And every now and then I'll steal myself away and grieve this moment in my life. I find that for me, it is a curious thing that I didn't do or say anything. And I find it just as curious that I found myself asking permission to honor my mom's passing away from this world. What is that about? What's there in me that arrests what is otherwise a strong constitution about who I am and where I'm from? In that moment, what is it that marks the distinction? The otherness of who I am, who we are, where we're at in an era of truth and reconciliation. What divides us? What brings us together? What sets us on a trajectory towards reconciling, coming to terms with, working with each other to figure this stuff out? What's needed? What will prolong and strengthen our resolve to really get at the work that we know is cultural safety and humility? In conclusion, Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and communities are working to undo colonial misreadings of who we are, where we come from, and what specific geographies mean to us in our part of the world. For far too long, we've been compartmentalized as Indians. We're all just Indians. Indians of little to no value to the construct and culture of what it means to be Canadian. It's only been until recently that non-Indigenous folks have taken a somewhat slight interest in understanding who we are and where we come from. And I'm not talking about the impact and implications of the historical context where oppression and assimilation are concerned. Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we too are making every effort to build and rebuild our languages, our identity, our culture, and to work out these complex and meaningful ceremonies. Indigenous peoples tell stories of the past and present, of a vibrant world in which all things have life and are respected, including our ancestors. They are another being and another realm, spiritual and cosmic realms. Our traditions are not merely stories or histories, nor are they static. They are living, intergenerational experiences of respectful cohabitation, where humans consider themselves to be only one of many beings in a sacred landscape. Our traditions and unique histories cannot be validated by the standard systems of a literate society. It would be unfair to judge the spiritual beliefs, the emotions and dreams of a culture based on traditions with tools that do not give much weight to matters that are of great importance to one culture and not in another. There are vast differences between Western and Indigenous perceptions of who and what form a society and family. To interpret such complex and layered traditions, cultures, customs, ceremonies, and practices requires more than a Native, First Nations, or Indigenous informant. It requires people to step outside of the colonial mainframe and become open to understanding other realities, to surrender your authority, empirical or standard, to surrender your power and your preconceived notions of the other and othering. Indigenous traditions hold knowledge based on centuries of intimate experiences viewing everything on the land as relations. Western knowledge of Indigenous cultural and ceremonial landscapes is most often impoverished, as it is based on very recent and shallow history and understanding based on an edict or outsider perspective. that is improvised when compared to the thousands of years of experience and knowledge held by Indigenous people who have a first-hand experience of Indigenous landscapes across thousands of years. A holistic approach and discussion would consider the physical, technological, and esoteric attributes and the ritual or social meaning of the very people that you are wanting to learn from. Indigenous peoples can be outsiders among Indigenous communities of which they are not members, but they may be aware of commonalities in worldviews and cultural protocols across Indigenous communities. It would be good and useful to draw on your curiosity, your willingness to learn, your ability to strengthen your understanding of who we are and where we come from, and who we all are as Canadians. And reflecting back on the experience with my mom passing, and I don't know if it's just that they were a part of the palliative care unit and they have a specific way to engage with patients at the end of life. I don't know that. But when my mom was passing from January to March, she spent most of her time at home, and she spent the last couple of weeks in the palliative care unit. But I can honestly say, and surprisingly say, that everyone in that experience, as my mom was dying, from the home care nurse to the pharmacist to the intern physician in the palliative care unit to the two attending physicians in the palliative care unit, the two RNs that looked after my mother as she was dying, the volunteer, even the lady that delivered the food every day, were just absolutely amazing people. And it just eased the anxiety that me and my family felt as my mom was coming to the end of her life. So, in the context of the processes that we know about cultural safety and humility or truth and reconciliation, I just think, well, whatever they're teaching these doctors, these health professionals in the context of palliative care, they're getting it right. Whatever that is, whatever the dance is between patient and doctor, that seems to me to be necessary in engaging Indigenous peoples in every aspect of the healthcare system, and not only at the end of life. It's obvious that we need to have unconditional empathy for people at the end of life. Not so obvious that we need to have unconditional empathy for Indigenous peoples in the context of truth and reconciliation. We are a people individually and collectively, simultaneously coming to terms with the past and trying to find a way forward. And we have yet to arrive at the conversation, as I alluded to in my talk, about truly knowing who we are and where we come from without applying the term Indigenous, right? So I really think it's important in this day and age to really reflect on what it means to you, not only as a health professional, but as a British Columbian and as a Canadian. And when you do that and you start to come to terms with your own sensibilities about who you are and where you're from, then I think there can be, and only then can there be, a truly meaningful dialogue between those who are from here and those who arrived here. Because it's not our culture that needs to be corrected, it's yours. And whether you like it or not, know it or not, admit it or not, come to terms with it or not, that historical context, the oppression and assimilation, the near genocide of our people is your history. It's Canada's history. This is all of our history. So it makes no sense to me to deny that, to justify it, to rationalize it, to outright deny it. Because whether we like it or not, as First Nations folks, we're grappling with it, we're dealing with it, we're trying to come to terms with it, all in an effort to arrive at some sensibility about defining our own way of understanding who we are and where we come from, and making that applicable to our daily life. I think, and this is my own belief, that we are merely an echo of a once mighty and great people. And we're simply trying to arrive at some semblance of that greatness today and live our life in a good way, and to be generous and to be kind and to be accepting of the people that we encounter as we live our life. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to ask my Uncle Shane if he has any thoughts or insights that he'd like to offer before we head into any comments or questions. Thank you.
Wow, Derek, thank you so much. Dr. Shane?
There we go. I was having trouble with the mute button. What I'd like to say is my gratitude to Bookwilla. Ha squall. Ha eat. Saying to Bookwilla, grateful for his sacred words today. Thankful for his sacred truth today, and sharing with all of us his grief and his grieving for his mother. I was in her presence for approximately 10 years when I lived in Nuuchahnulth territory, Port Alberni, which is where my mother's wonderful family comes from. And seeing her amazing silent strength, her silent spirituality, who she was as a human being, and what she'd been through. And being honored by Bookwilla's father and his siblings to sit with her for a few moments while she was in palliative care, and hearing a really tiny but everlasting significant moment in her life when she met my sister, Maggie, at Indian Residential School, and listening to her tell that beautiful moment to me was absolutely amazing. And I understood when she did who I was seeing for the 10 years that I lived in the same community as her and her husband and her children, younger children. Absolutely amazing. The grief that we all go through when we lose someone that we love so much, that grief continues. We learn to live with it and interact with it in a positive and good way through our ceremonies and our spirituality, through our language. And I'm grateful to Bookwilla today for bringing that forward for everyone to hear and to witness. It's important that we, as human beings, know and understand that our fellow human beings suffer grief in some way, shape, or form, and that we need to be compassionate with them. More often than not, we don't understand what our fellow human beings are going through. So it's a puzzle. More than likely and more often than not, it's grief, not knowing how to work with that, not able to remember their own language, culture, and ceremonies for good reason. Canada disconnected us from that. When I was listening, I was remembering my own mother. We're talking about mothers today. I was remembering my own mother and the wonderfulness and the generosity of who she was to myself and my two wonderful older sisters. I was remembering my sister passed away, Maggie, Maud's sister friend from Indian Residential School, and remembering how my older sister and I took care of her when she passed. I think it's important that we all remember what we heard today. Because what we heard today is a very important part of who we are as human beings. Canadian citizens from other parts of the world are beginning to know us because we are saying who we are, not some anthropologist who read fifth and sixth, seventh hand statements made by our most recent ancestors about who we are and getting it wrong for most part. Sociologists who study such things still not getting who we are or the complexities of our families, our value system, our belief system. So it's good to hear from us how we interact with death and how we interact with the world around us and the supernatural, how we interact. Over my left shoulder, you can see a thunderbird. It's part of a curtain given to me by my wonderful nephew, Manuel Strain. Also, the two half circles you see are part of double-headed serpent, supernatural beings that are very much a part of my Nuuchahnulth bloodline and my Coast Salish bloodline, symbols of our connection to that realm. I'm grateful to Bookwilla. I'm grateful to you as well, and all of those who have participated to make today possible. I'm grateful to you. I hope that the young people who are here in the supernatural realm of computer world, that you let others know. You let other people know what you heard today and what you've seen in direct relation to Bookwilla sharing with you not only his intellect, but his emotions as well, his birthright in relation to language, song, and connection to that very wonderful place called DT Dot. So that's what I have to say. I'm extremely grateful. Thank you for listening.
Oh, see you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really want to express my gratitude, really from my own in 4 ways. One is that that, if you don't mind me calling Bookwilla, your generosity in sharing. This is still this period of grief, and you are willing and share this grief with us. And as Dr. pointed out, your raw emotions is there to share with us. That's not easy. Thank you so much. And secondly, you share because you want to help us understand. And that level of understanding, for us to be able to go beyond just the surface, to understand the song, what you go through, what you experience, is very important. And I also want to thank you for those moments, the moments where you interact with the health professionals. So it gives us insight as to how can we be unconditionally empathic? How can we make sure that we support you? And how can we make it at those points of decision? It's not about permission. It's about loving each other. And then your gentle question back to us to say, who am I? Who am I as a settler? And what can I learn? And what can I do to truth and reconciliation? I am very grateful for you, both of you, for your sharing. And Dr. Point also sharing about your mother, your family, and help us to understand the complexity. And then finally, the 4 worlds, the sea world, the land and mountain world, the sky world, and spirit world, how we are not just alone, but we're very much part of this together. So really appreciate that tremendously. There were 2 comments that I saw. Just hands up to you for the care of your mother and acknowledgement of the individuals involved in supporting her team in caring for all of you. Beautiful words. Thank you so much. This is from Massey. And also Kimberly, this session was remarkably beautiful. Deep appreciation, gratitude to everyone who made this happen, but especially Mr. Thompson, Čaabať, Bookwilla. So thank you so much. Also, Sherry has a comment. Derek, thank you so much for sharing in a very personal way. I appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm glad your experience support from the palliative care and the home health team was meaningful. I'll carry that reminder with me. And in fact, absolutely, we all need to know that. Derek, maybe I'll ask some of the pre-submitted question. The first one is, what are some of the specific cultural details of what personal steps a family member needs to follow to honor someone after passing? I think you already have answered some of it, especially about sharing griefs, singing, and healing. And any additional insights on that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. Um, and arguably a never-ending question, right? I think death is not only inevitable for all of us, but it carries an equal measure of significance as birth. Um, there's a really interesting time in my life. My mom found out she was stricken with pancreatic terminal cancer at the end of December 2024. And I intended to interview her that first week in January 2025 as part of the speaker series. For the last couple of years, I've been just slowly, methodically building her confidence that she could be a speaker in the speaker series because she has a lot of important things to say. And in true irony, she was sick and she couldn't participate in that speaker series in January. And she ultimately met her demise in March. But what is interesting to me, and I have no answer for it because sometimes that's just the way life is. It's mysterious and there are no answers. But when I first started with UBC Faculty of Medicine in 2021, I hosted the first session of the speaker series in November 2021. It was with Chief Wayne Christian, and quite literally, when that conversation was done, I received an email like 30 seconds after that conversation was done, and it was from Joanne Ma. And Joanne Ma is a Chinese Canadian. She was an associate professor in the UGME program at the Faculty of Medicine. And her parents moved here from China. She met her husband out of Lloydminster, Hugh, a beautiful man who was of Ukrainian and Chinese descent. And in the email, she insisted that we meet. And I met her in December of 2021 and for coffee, and we must have talked for about 3 hours. And the foundation of that conversation was that she truly believed that our stories, our individual and collective stories, is what's going to bring us to this place. Whatever reconciliation means, we're never really going to truly achieve reconciliation until we truly know and understand who we are and where we come from. And that's through our stories. So we met every month, often for dim sum. And I met her husband, I met her children, and we became close friends. Joanne Ma died in January of this year, at the time when I learned that my mom was about to die. And, in the midst of profound grief, I just think that there's great wisdom that comes from our mothers. There's great wisdom that comes from the women that raised us, whether they were our mothers or grandmothers or our aunties or our sisters. I've believed for a very long time that we're going to see a profound shift in the way we look at the world and the way we treat each other through women. And so when I think back to this experience, when I think about my life from March 15th till now, and all of the goodness that Joanne Ma brought into my life, and all of the goodness that the women in my life, my grandmothers, my aunties, my sisters, bring me to this place of just what it means to be truly accepting of the state that we're in an era of truth and reconciliation, but also of figuring out this tension that we ultimately arrive at of what it means to be truly sort of filled with a purpose of empathy about these issues. And so I think it's that. And when I think it's that, I often look, well, where's the evidence? If I think it's that, where's the evidence of that truth? So in last month on September 23rd, I hosted the second in-person all-day live event of the Indigenous Speaker Series with Dr. David Suzuki and my uncle, Dr. Shane Point. And we had a beautiful day of ceremony and purpose and conversation. And at the conclusion of the day, we ask, well, how are we going to get there? Whether it's climate change or cultural safety and humility or truth and reconciliation, how do we get there? And without hesitation, both Dr. Suzuki and Dr. Point said, it's with love. We're going to get there with love. We have to get there with some semblance of love and acceptance. And for a guy who's mostly cynical, that to me seemed profoundly symbolic of who my mother was in life. I'm not that guy. And so if there's meaning in this life, I think it's that's how we get there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing from your heart. Dr. Point, anything you'd like to add?
Well, there we go. To add to the moment, when I had the brief conversation, well, it wasn't a conversation, I was listening, actually. When I was listening to Maud, Maud explained her relationship with my sister. My sister Maggie was a bigger girl. Maud was a little girl. And Maud said she was by herself in this new place, horrible place called Indian Residential School. And she was by herself, scared, not knowing. And she heard this voice from behind her. And she turned around, and it was my sister Maggie. And my sister Maggie said to Maud, "It's okay. It's okay, you're with me now. You come with me, you're with me." And Maud said it was that moment that she knew she was going to be cared for by this big girl, Maggie. And it was my sister Maggie who brought me to knowing clearly unconditional love. My sister Maggie loved me unconditionally. And when I listened to Maud in that few moments that we had together, I understood that Maud knew and practiced unconditional love with her children, grandchildren, her husband, and those around her. And when I listened to Suzuki-san at the end of our conversation, use the word love, I was amazed to hear him say that. And it's the truth. Eat, squam. True words. And for me, in the work that I do, it's about making the connection with all other human beings who don't come from our sacred territories, helping them to know, begin to know, to begin to understand that we, Hualmuch, Mistimuch, Tamuch, we proud human beings from this land, from this earth, from this geography, have something profound to offer others. And it's simply, and we've demonstrated it, our relatives on the east coast of this continent welcomed, actually fed and saved the explorers who landed here. They were sick, they were hungry, they didn't know where they were, and they didn't know how to survive. And our great relatives were generous with them. That's who we are, Squalmuch, Mistimuch, as Koas. We are generous human beings, and we ultimately help others to survive. That's what we do. And that hasn't been recognized. It's briefly said somewhere, but it's rarely recognized what we did for the first European men who were dying and sick when they arrived, that we helped them back to good health by feeding them, providing them with a place to live and a place to thrive. That we are generous human beings, very generous. And it's that generosity of heart and spirit that we share with everyone, but it doesn't seem that everyone gets it. I find myself in moments with other people who are mildly and outrageously surprised at the depth of who we are spiritually, who we are intellectually, and who we are physically, and our connection not only to the geographies and ecosystems that provide us with language, culture, and ceremony, but our deeper connection to the supernatural and how we interact with that. I'm grateful to Bookwilla today for bringing us to a moment of grief, because I believe for myself, it's in that moment of grief that we truly understand, or not understand, but that's when we truly know our true selves as human beings, loving human beings, struck by the death of a loved one. So that's what I have to say. And I hope that all of the young people who are here today are listening to that and go away from this moment and think about what they heard and further educate themselves in who we are as Huelmuk Mustimuk, proud human beings from this earth. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. And again, both of you spoken about your mom's generosity. And in fact, you both have been very generous in sharing your stories and the and love that we need to move forward. I'm just going to take a moment to just acknowledge some of the comments that were said. Honestly, this is the most impactful round I've attended. Gila Katzla, or thank you, Derek. Hands raised to you for sharing. Derek, I would be honored to. These are not me. I just want to read out folks that wrote. Dear Derek, I would be honored to learn from you and to apply your ancestors' wisdom to improve and implement within Canadian healthcare practices. Thank you. And living on the reservation, the grief is different. We weren't given tools to grieve in healthy ways. Our people are still grieving deaths 30 plus years ago. So bringing this work to educate is very helpful. Thank you so much. And thank you for your generous knowledge. Lydia said, I will never forget today. Thank you. Grateful for today's session. This is not easy to share those personal experiences that influence how we interact with this institution as service providers. I applaud the work taking place and feel privileged to be helpful for those needing supports in the time of loss. Thank you, Summer. Summer has a question that follow up, so I will get to that soon. I also want to acknowledge Denise. Just want to express how honored we are to have had all this information given to us, sharing a very personal loss experience so openly, so heartful with us, so respectfully done, with a very special message from your mother that we as people should practice each day. Genuine respect, kindness, generosity, and truly accepting everyone with love and empathy. Such a profound message. Love to read more of this quote, but Derek, if it's helpful to you, I'd love to capture all these quotes and send to you. I think I want to thank our audience for these excellent comments, and of course, stimulated by Derek and Dr. Point, your thoughts. I'm going to come back to Summer's question. My question is, as an away from my home territory Indigenous person, I work towards building trusting relationships between Indigenous communities and the ambulance service on Vancouver Island. Do you have any suggestions for further learnings on trauma-informed practice that I could benefit from in my search for building my skill set and understanding the many nations here? Welcome your thoughts there.
That is really an important and timely question. This past summer, I was listening to Wade Davis, who was being interviewed by Nala Ayed with the CBC radio program called Ideas. Wade Davis is a renowned anthropologist, UBC alumni, and has written numerous and inspiring books, particularly about the perspective of anthropology as it applies to Indigenous peoples in Canada. And in the midst of that conversation, he talked about the term Indigenous. And he talked about the term Indigenous from a non-Indigenous perspective. That when we use the word Indigenous in whatever its application, whether it's land or territorial acknowledgement or cultural safety and humility or truth and reconciliation, whatever the context, he said that we rarely, if ever, when we talk about Indigenous peoples, make any effort to decolonize the English language. And I thought, well, that's a pretty remarkable thing to say. And then he went on further to talk about the term Indigenous is simply a polite word for saying savage. So if you look from a purely anthropological lens, savage is one of the first terms applied to us in this country and certainly generally across North America. That we went from being savages to being Indians, to being Aboriginal, to being First Nations, to being Indigenous. That it is simply a polite evolutionary way to say we're still savages. That I'm Indigenous just as much as somebody from Shubenacadie back east is Indigenous. I'm Indigenous just as much as Uncle Shane is Indigenous. It's no different than saying we're all Indians. You have the Indian Act, you have Indian reservations where you segregate Indians to Indian reservations. You have Indian residential schools. Indians aren't allowed to vote. Indians aren't allowed to hire legal counsel. We're all just Indians. So the construct is that we're all Indians. And the construct, part of it, deliberately is to ensure that there is no conversation between Indian people and Canadians, or at least any meaningful discourse between those who are from here and those who arrived here to stay. So Wade Davis made the argument that we need to really move away from the term Indigenous, and that requires getting to know us, which requires effort and work and thoughtful execution of the exchange between those who are from here and those who arrived here. And I've heard it in my role here at UBC in the last 4 years, I've heard it consistently. Oh, that's a lot of work. And, oh, there's so many First Nations. And, oh, there's so many Inuit and so many. I've heard all of the excuses and rationale at the resistance to get to know who we are and where we're from. But Wade Davis made the argument that's exactly what we need to do. Is we need to make the time, the effort, create the resources, the ability, the wherewithal, the capacity to really get at who we are and where we're from. That Nuuchahnulth people don't think the same way Coast Salish people do. Coast Salish people don't think the same way Dene people do. Dene people don't think the way Cree people do. Wade Davis also made the example that you could drive from Vancouver to Hope, or Vancouver to Chilliwack, Chilliwack to Hope, Hope through the Coquihalla connector up into Merritt, Kamloops, Kelowna, all the way into 100 Mile House, into Williams Lake. And in that distance, which is about 700 or 800 kilometers, you could encounter 12 unique, isolate, distinct languages that are incomparable to each other, completely unrelated to one another. You know, Europe proper has one common language family. One. Yet in that 700 or 800 kilometers, you've encountered 12 distinct, isolate languages. That's remarkable to me, and incomparable, at least in North and South America, and then uncommon, unparalleled in Indigenous cultures around the world. So I think in the context of the question, it's important to, if you can, let go of what you deem to be impossible about getting to know the uniqueness and the distinctness of who we are and where we're from, and create the strategy, the wherewithal, the capacity, whatever you want to call it, to really get at who we are and where we're from. I think we've now reached a point in an era of truth and reconciliation where we can move away from the term Indigenous and really get at the uniqueness that make up who we are and where we're from.
Thank you. Dr. Point, should I give the final word to you?
Thank you very much, sir. When I was a boy, my second leader in my life away from my mother was a young man called Carl Bailey. Carl Bailey was a petty officer, then became a chief petty officer in the Sea Cadet Corps that I belonged to when I was a boy. And he was an amazing human being and leader at 16. When he finished high school, he moved to Vancouver to go to BCIT. And he became an ambulance person. And of course, true to his nature as a good human being, moved through the ranks to become a chief ambulance. And he worked for many years in the downtown east side. He chose to work there. They asked him to move more than a few times and he wouldn't. And in my brief conversation with him, in seeing him, surprised to see him, Chief Carl Bailey said to me, in his work as an ambulance person, he wouldn't allow young men and women to work with him if they had prejudice in their hearts and their minds, or racism in their hearts and their minds. And when they asked him how he worked in the downtown east side as an ambulance person, attendant, he said to me, what I see is human beings. And he told the young people who earned and worked hard to be able to work with him, they earned the right to work with Chief Carl Bailey. And he said, first and foremost, we're helping human beings. They are human beings, just like you and me, and they deserve the dignity and integrity and all of our education to help them to survive in the moment. What an amazing young man at 16, and a leader, and what an amazing gentleman at 50, 55, and 60. So it gets back to what Suzuki-san said a couple of weeks ago. It's about love and respect. So for me, I take Chief Carl Bailey's words to heart when I have an opportunity to speak to ambulance people or health authorities. I let them know what Chief Bailey said. Really wonderful young man whose parents immigrated here from Scotland and the Bailey clan there. To be here to have such an amazing son. Where that came from, I have no idea. But I do know that my respect for Chief Bailey is undeniable, unshakable, and true, because he always treated me as a boy, teenage boy, with respect. And he required from me that I work just as hard as anyone else, and anyone else in the Corps worked just as hard as I did to earn his respect. What Bookwilla is saying, Hualmach, Hualmach. That's how we describe ourselves. Hualmach, human being from this earth. Koas, West Coast, Nuuchahnulth, Koas, real live human being. And Dr. Suzuki-san said it. My aunties and uncles and older brothers and sisters who are fluent in the language say it. Natsamat, we are one. Human beings are one. Natsamat, we are one. Regardless of where we come from in the world, we are one, and we should treat each other with the dignity and integrity that each one of us should enjoy and love each other. The great, the great book, the greatest story ever told, the Bible. It says in there, love your neighbor. I'd like to see that happen. Love thy neighbor. It says it in that great book. So love and respect to all of you. Love and light to all of you. You take care of yourselves and learn, and pick up the book that Wade Davis wrote, that Bookwilla so kindly offered to you. Find it and read it. Move. And don't be afraid to say no to the status quo and begin to know and understand who we are as Swalmach, Mastima. And you'll find that, as it has always been, we're generous human beings, willing to share, regardless of the pain and suffering Canada has inflicted on us over the last 150 years. We're still open-minded and generous and willing to help you overcome who you are as human beings. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bookwilla. Thank you, Dr. Points. On behalf of the audience, just amazing what you shared. I want to thank the audience for being here. Also, remember what Derek ask us, who are we? What can we learn? What can we do in truth and reconciliation? Thank you so much. I want to thank Ministry of Health, Vancouver Physician Staff Association, VCH, Indigenous Health, First Nations Health Authority, and all the members of the Engaging Physician Indigenous Cultural Safety Task Group. Folks, wonderful way to continue our work today and Monday, and thank you everyone for being here. I want to just thank my colleague Pooja and for a great organization together with Jamie and Helen and Minika. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.